Hey folks, welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I am so grateful that you are here. Welcome to this astrology double feature. We're going to talk about the upcoming annular solar eclipse and partial lunar eclipse that's happening starting Saturday, October 14th, 2023, and then our full moon partial lunar eclipse is going to be on the 28th of October, so pretty close to Halloween here. So we're going to talk all things eclipses, give you technical details about what is an eclipse, talk about the astrology of eclipses, and then look at some major trends in terms of this particular eclipse. Look at the last eclipse cycle because that one is surely coming to a close. There are definitely some harmonics in terms of the astrology from the last eclipse and during that time to now, and I'm going to go over that stuff because eclipses are they're very karmic and they have a very powerful undertow of soul movement and soul direction. So that's a lot of the astrology aspect. So we're just going to go into everything eclipses, and the second half of this presentation is going to be the new moon forecast for the Libra folks because this annular solar eclipse is going to be in the sign of Libra. So I don't want to cheat the Libra people out of their new moon forecast, but I really just didn't want to make two videos. So we're going to talk with one video, two sections or portions, and when I start the Libra new moon, not only will I announce that I'm doing that, but there will be a glyph or a graphic in the top left hand corner to let you know, okay, we're talking about the Libra new moon forecast, which really is just going to look at the much more condensed astrology of the new moon to the full moon. So we will get much more into the minutia, right, of what the moon is doing and look at the big transits that are going to be happening and how it relates to the Libra person. So without further ado, let's get right into this eclipse forecast. So let's see here. I want to show you first and foremost a website. We're going to start with the technical deets, okay? So just in case you're new to what eclipses are, you're kind of new to astrology, you're not sure of the language, and even if you are, this is always great review. It's not like I don't know these things either, but I come forward and I learn something by teaching it every single time, like, oh, that's a whole new way of looking at it, or I hadn't researched that particular detail yet, so let's look into that. So I come to timeanddate.com. It's all one word. You can see this website, timeanddate.com. And I use it for a lot of different stuff. This is not an endorsement of timeanddate.com. Like, officially, they're not sponsoring anything. I just use this website. So you can go to the banner that says Annular Solar Eclipse, and you can get all kinds of information about eclipses and other types of cosmological events, especially about the sun and the moon, because it's called timeanddate.com. And the sun, our relationship to the sun in particular, really does kind of determine the date and the time. So, and the moon is in direct relationship, especially at eclipses, as well as new and full moons. So let's start talking about the technical aspect of an eclipse and what it actually is. So you can go to this website and you can open like the path of the eclipse, and it shows you where the shadow is going to be cast or where you're going to be able to have a visual of the eclipse. And so you can see that it's starting out into the Pacific Ocean and the Pacific Northwest and cutting down through Oregon and Washington and Nevada, coming through down to Texas, Central America, and then coming up and swooping up through Brazil. And then as it stretches out, you see less of the eclipse, but it's still visible. So we're having an annular solar eclipse. And so what that really means is the word annular, as much as it does resemble the word annual, it really has more to do with the shape or what you see with the eclipse, because it's an annal. So it's the ring around it that you're going to see with this solar eclipse. So that's why it's called annular. Eclipses are not rare. They happen twice a year. I'll explain the mechanics of that as well. But this imagery, or this little image or animation, is showing you what you actually would see at the time of the eclipse. Now, the reason that there is an eclipse is that at new and full moons, the sun and the moon will line up longitudinally in relation to our where we're observing the event, right? So we're standing on Earth and we look up, and the new moon is the moon coming in between us and the sun in a longitudinal alignment, okay? When they are aligned also in latitude, or also called declination, as far as I understand it, I am not an astronomer, but I have studied a bit of astronomy and stellar physics. So the idea here is that, and I'm not trying to like, hey, look at me, how smart I am. I'm letting you know I do have baseline credentials in a lot of the things that I talk about. So, and I know how to research. So, and this is what I'm also encouraging people to do. Go to these sites, learn about these things for yourself, like actually get in in a habit of reading and researching. So when we have eclipses, it is when the moon in new moon and full moon are at the same declination, or they are at the same latitude. And so then it is lining up not only longitudinally, but also in latitude. And this is why there's actual obstruction. So it's not going to be exactly conjunct the south node. And if it was, or closer to it, we would have a total solar eclipse, but it's partial or annular. So you're going to get the ring of fire. And that in itself has its own impact on us frequency wise, right? Just like light, photons and light move in a wave pattern. They have a frequency. And so if you've ever seen a total solar eclipse, you know how bizarre and weird it is that it just gets dark in the middle of the day and everything around you starts to act like the sun's going down. And then it all of a sudden, within a very short amount of time goes back to daylight. So this is the same thing, but you'll see the ring of fire. There will be something visible, right? So I just wanted to share that website and show you the animation so you know, and that there are resources to go and look up things to find out. Now, there will be a total solar eclipse. I'll just show it to you real quick in 2024. In April, that will be a total solar eclipse that will be crisscrossing the U.S. the other way from the one that happened in 2017. So it's going to cut right through New England, on through Ohio, and again down through Texas, just coming the other way. So X marks the spot with these solar eclipses, would you not say? Especially down here on the border. Gosh, that's weird. So that's happening in April. So we'll certainly be talking about that as we get closer to it. So let's go back to the actual astrology chart so I can show you here. Now, the nodes of the moon are these two symbols. And like I said, if you already know all this, just sit as you would in a review, right? So the nodes of the moon are these symbols here, and they represent the points at which the lunar orbit crosses the ecliptic plane. And the ecliptic plane is our orbital relationship with the sun. It doesn't matter if you are of the opinion that we rotate around the sun or if the sun and the moon are rotating around us, okay? I mean, it doesn't matter, because for the sake of what we are observing, there is a pattern, and it is circular, it is cyclical, and there are these points where the lunar orbit crosses over the solar orbit, and that's the nodes of the moon. So the ascending node, or the north node, which right now is in Aries, is called Rahu, the head of the dragon, and the south node, or the descending node, or Ketu, is the tail of the dragon. And it is named after these nodes of the moon in particular, named after the undulating pattern of the dragon in the Draco constellation. So the north node, or the head of the dragon, represents the soul in its current trajectory, where it's headed. So when you look at it in a natal reading, for instance, you are getting information about where the soul or the unconscious drives are pulling the individual in this lifetime, and where they're coming out of. So we're all experiencing the current nodes of the moon as a soul drive in this moment. And where we're coming out of is the south node, the tail of the dragon, where we've already mastered. So when the new and full moons are in alignment with these degrees of where the nodes are, which is a juncture point between the lunar orbit and the solar orbit, it shows this this activation at a soul level to what is otherwise a much more personable and personal development cycle, which is the lunar cycle, right? The lunar cycle, the new moon, the full moon, back to new moon, is a monthly cycle that regenerates and allows for growth and development of the individual, right? Of us through our present reality and what we're experiencing. So when the eclipses happen, they activate that process in a much deeper, much more karmic, and it's like a time capsule. A lunar cycle is a month, but an eclipse cycle is 6 months. And so it takes so much more experience in the darkness, especially because both eclipses will do something to obscure the full illumination, whether it's the full illumination of the sun or the full illumination of the full moon. The Earth's shadow is cast upon the moon in a lunar eclipse, which is happening on the 28th of October as well. Very close to Halloween, and there's some pretty significant scorpionic things going on in that moment. So, but we'll get there. These eclipses are, like I said, they're like time capsules. And so what is activated or initiated at the new and full moon is something that needs a lot more incubation time, something that has to do with deep soul drives. These are unconscious drives. These are aspects of the soul, not the everyday consciousness and the way that we move through the world as our personality. No, this is something much deeper. So we have to also be patient and have a sense of the long game when we're talking about eclipse cycles, okay? So this is why we're going to go back and look at the last eclipse cycle that is now finishing up. And it's not only finishing up, but there is kind of like this jump pad experience here that is really going to take us through the whole next year into September and October of 2024. So, I want to impress upon the listener here, if you're not already familiar, about the underlying karmic stamp on these eclipses. So, and it's not, and yeah, you can see it as a bad omen if you want. It's more about whatever is put into place here or activated with some sort of intention, especially a new moon, right? A new moon is normally a beginning stage in unconsciousness, something that is born into being, but is not something that we are objectively piloting necessarily. That comes after the full moon, when we have full illumination of ourselves in the wake of all of the things that are happening. So when you set in intentions with the new moon, you have to be very mindful of what's happening here, because your intentions as a person, right, have the imprint of the soul, and in this case a south node eclipse, the imprint of some sort of karmic mastery, something but where we've been. And that's the thing about the tail of the dragon. It is essential to provide momentum as the dragon is flying, right? I mean, just like a rudder, you know, it's just, and the momentum that comes from that tail back and forth. But it's important to also realize that we're coming out of something with the south node. And if you attempt to hold, you know, if you're holding on to the tail for dear life, you're eventually going to get whipped off, right? You got to get up to that head and like be part of where it's headed, right? Which is in Aries, which is within Aries, and you have Chiron that is here as well. And in fact, during this eclipse cycle between now and next spring, or this upcoming spring, March 2024, Chiron and the North Node, right, are going to come into a conjunction with each other. So we're coming out of something, and we can't, and we're being challenged, I think, in a lot of ways to not lose this sense of innocence about what it is we want to provide, what kind of society we want to be part of, right? We're talking Libra, right? The scales of balance, right? What is Lady Justice holding? You know, Libra is ruled by Venus, and Venus is, you know, the Lady Justice is blind, meaning that she's holding the scales and not being influenced by her own biases of what she sees. She is using her sensitivity to balance, to feel true balance, okay? But Libra has a very Saturnian quality. It's very definitive. There's only one place that these scales will go based on what's put on them, right? There's limited options in terms of equilibrium. There's only one way, right? They have to be balanced. And so we're coming out of this, and it's important to also recognize here before we get into the timeline here, going back to the last eclipse cycle, looking at the harmonics, like I said, and you'll see what I mean if you're kind of confused. You'll see what I mean when we go back, but also to that, Mars just in the late degrees of Libra, which Mars is at its detriment. It's at its weakest in Libra. It wants to be in Aries. So for Mars to meet the South Node like that in its weakest state, and then to be in a square to Pluto, right? And these two planets rule the sign of Scorpio in different ways, but for them to come into a square like that was Sunday. That was when the shit really started to hit the fan with Palestine and Israel. Mars square Pluto, and the South Node and Pluto are still, they're still in a square to each other. There's still a lot of tension about, what we have mastered, where we've been karmically, what we're the most comfortable with in terms of our power at a soul level, and the destructive element of Pluto in the institutions, right? I mean, the idea here is that we invest in justice and diplomacy and balance and equilibrium, in peace. We are invested in peace in relationships, but then you have Pluto in the actual institutions that are built off of that is just destroying everything. So I feel like that a lot of the systems that we have come to rely on, because Libra it's the rule of law, right? It is the rule of law of a peaceful and civilized society or relationship. It's a balanced contract. And as Pluto is destroying, the most traditional and time-honored aspects of our institutions, for better or for worse, it is these aspects of where we've been and what we've mastered, I think is sometimes really difficult to take ourselves out of. And I think Mars meeting the South Node, and I think Mars in a square to Pluto over the weekend, I think Mars at its weakest is overcompensating. It is a soldier, not a diplomat. And he's just like, you know what? We're going in and we're taking care of business. And regardless of what you think is really happening, what is happening in Israel and Palestine, it is happening and being presented at the time that these things were, this square with Mars and Pluto. So very much on cue, I would say, in terms of these transits. But we have to, part of heading back, heading towards Aries in terms of a soul trajectory and a compulsion almost. That's the other thing we have to be careful. It can be kind of a compulsion with the North Node to get to this place of creative potential in all of its potentiality in Aries, right? The seed is all potential, right? It's not till it germinates that it starts the process of growth and going through a cycle. As a seed, it's all potential. And this is where we're kind of being drawn to at this unconscious level. I think this is a good point to go back to March and April, actually, to the beginning of the last eclipse, which was an Aries North Node eclipse, right? It was setting the stage for this cycle that is now ending, that had to do with the creative potential must be substantiated. So there was something really significant that happened a couple of weeks really before the eclipse that has everything to do with this upcoming eclipse. And for those of you who've been following me astrologically, especially the last eclipse forecast that I did, you will probably remember, because I made a big deal, I think I did, in my mind I've made a big deal out of this, and I remember exactly what was going on in my life and how it has formulated and grown since then to right now. And I'm like, whoa, yes, but it's about the long game, right? And realizing that you can put all of your creative effort and potential and potentiation into a relationship, a contract, a society, whatever, a commitment, which is what Libra in the 7th house is, but you can't control what is offered in opposition to that. You can't control the response to whatever and whoever you're in a relationship with. And that's what Libra really lends itself to, is reconstructing oneself in order to establish that balance. So we had the eclipse, the solar eclipse, on the 20th of April. Okay, it was a very last degree of Aries, right? The idea that all that creative potential must be substantiated. And there were some really significant things that happened during that time. But let me, like, going back to it especially. So let's go back to when the Sun and Jupiter were in a conjunction with each other. Because what you're going to find here, and you may remember, is that this is the complete opposition degree-wise to where this upcoming eclipse is, 21 to 22 degrees. So this, now, nothing better of a blessing than the Sun conjunct Jupiter, especially with two planets that rule other fire signs, and not the one that is not Aries, but the Sun rules Leo, Jupiter rules Sagittarius, and they're both conjunct in another fire sign. So I just want to share with you real quick what a Sun-Jupiter conjunction really looks like as a transit, because it's like a blessing, basically, and it gives a general feeling of happiness, optimism, good luck, for all kinds of different professional and spiritual growth, an urge or a desire to do everything you can to experience everything fully. You may get stuff, expansion in all areas of life, right? And this is about the subjective, instinctual, spontaneous aspect of ourselves, our creative potential as potential and desire. This is what Aries represents. And so when these two came together at this point, right before the last eclipse cycle, I remember being like, oh, this is in total opposition to the upcoming eclipse in October. So whatever was happening during this time in your life, whatever you felt like was kind of blessed and initiated in terms of creative potential. And there was tons of optimism around things around this time. I remember there being lots of optimism. And then we had the solar eclipse on the 20th that was like, well, it must be substantiated. And I just want to read 22 degrees of Aries in terms of Sabian symbols. The gate to the garden of all fulfilled desires. Abundance made possible by human togetherness and cooperation, right? And this is all the cosmic optimism in its most pure form, being blessed at this moment. Well, then you come forward to the eclipse that's about to happen, the opposite of it, and it's a child giving birds a drink of water at a fountain, right? And this opposition is about, you have all this cosmic optimism and all your desires fulfilled, and really what is it meant to lead to? Well, this kind of solicitude, right? This concern for the welfare and happiness of others, in especially those who are thirsting for renewal. So through the blessing of your own fulfilled desires and abundance, it translates to a situation where you're able to offer that which you've already gained for yourself to those who want it, right? And so the thing about it, though, is that it's an eclipse. And so this particular experience that may be fulfilled from this blessing in April that then came, the next eclipse cycle came right after, is also going to be eclipsed, meaning that this process of and experience of the solicitude, it's not going to be as instant gratification maybe as you'd want it to be, okay? And all of us, not just, and it's all of us, right? We have to accept that there is something about this experience that is going to be deeply embedded in terms of where we've been. And I think this is going to be really difficult, especially because all of this Scorpio energy is about to get lit up during even just the short amount of time. And Scorpio season's going to happen. But Mars is the ruler of Scorpio. It's going to come into Scorpio. And then there's, the Sun and Mercury are going to come into Scorpio. So there's going to be lots of oppositions to Jupiter, lots of oppositions to Uranus coming in the next weeks, basically. So I think that we had this idea, this sense, this optimism that was really blessed at that point, and then the substantiation of the potential was again kind of embedded into the eclipse cycle that started in the spring, something very deep that needed to be worked out. And I think a lot of it has to do with there's just so much letting go of how things have been organized and balanced for so long that we have to let it go. And I know that's like so difficult when, depending on what it is, and the birth pangs of this process are not easy right now. The other thing to point out as this is happening is that Pluto is at 0 degrees Aquarius, and this is its first time coming into Aquarius for a very, very long time. So it, which is right after the signing of the Declaration of Independence, right? Because right now, Pluto is doing its last pass over the natal Pluto of the U.S. So in the 1780 blah blah blah, this is when Pluto came back into Aquarius, and it's not like, the Declaration of Independence was signed and everything was great. I mean, it was still a struggle for a while, and we didn't even get a constitution until much later. So this was also happening, and you can see that Venus at the time of this conjunction in April was also conjunct Alcyon, right? The main star in the Pleiades constellation, Venus ruling Taurus, which is where the Pleiades are in terms of zodiac sign and in the constellation of Taurus. Just the vision and a sense of, and a real palpable sense of value, because that's what Venus rules too. So, our senses, what's valuable, what has value to us, and of course beauty and harmony, because she rules Libra too. This moment before the eclipse was, I think, really, really important, because here are these harmonics now, right? The Sun-Jupiter conjunction, opposite of where the eclipse will be. You have Venus here at Alcyon. I thought that was a huge, and a direct trine to Pluto, 0 degrees Aquarius. And as I'm recording this, which is the 10th of October, Pluto is going to station direct, and it's going to be in Aquarius as the sun is coming into Aquarius, okay? So, which is in January. So we're slowly returning back to the place where whatever we activated, whatever was blessed at this moment, whatever kind of like cosmic optimism, dreaming, or, desire that you were feeling in terms of yourself was being blessed, and you had this sense of real vision with Venus and Alcyon. And if you even look up, Alcyon as, a fixed star, and some of the ancient astrology that is connected to it, let's see here. Alcyon. I mean, it has a lot to do with sight and proper sight. And Alcyon had a lot of, has a lot of influence in terms of ancient astrology and navigation, of course, because it's the main star in the Pleiades cluster. And sometimes it talks about it'll presage like blindness and accident of sight. So that sight is a big deal. But the thing that really gets me about Alcyon is that it rules the base of the neck, right? So you're talking about C6 and C7. These are the vertebrae that connect to the thoracic spine. This is a big juncture point. So there was something about this time that whatever you put into desire, whatever prayer you said, whatever desire was spontaneously ignited and blessed with Jupiter at this time, it is now coming to some level of fruition, but there's more patience, right? The eclipse means that the intention we want to set in terms of acting on that desire and optimism, being able to give that optimism to others who are thirsting for it. Again, there is something about the South Node part of it that is there's something that we have to let go of in order to return back to that sense of new creative potential. There's a bridging of a gap here that we're going to see with the full moon eclipse. That's going to be, we're going to think there's so much Scorpio coming. It's going to make people very hungry for some sort of deep, meaningful experience. And not to say that there's anything wrong with that, but again, it's going to be an eclipsed full moon when it happens. So we're in for a ride, let me tell you what. So this trine with Venus at Alcyon and Pluto at 0 degrees Aquarius was also kind of one of those moments of intensity, of just like being able to hold the resonance of the big picture in your mind's eye, and Pluto being like, yeah, here's the big social picture. I don't know, there's something there that we couldn't have ever imagined it turning out to be. And I would say with the eclipse, it's not exactly what we thought it was going to be, and it's just going to be even, it's going to take the next 6 months to really let that unfold. I know that's frustrating, and believe me, I know, I know what I was thinking, what I put into action at this time in my own life and what is happening. And I mean, so how it's unfolding now, I can already see I can already feel like the underlying template of it, but there's still so much more karmic shit to work out. And that's the thing about a South Node eclipse. So, we got this burning ring of fire that we got to jump into, and it's not going to be easy. So get ready. But do you have the courage? And the thing about Mars coming into Scorpio actually is, if anything is going to have the courage to jump into the ring of fire, it's going to be Mars, because Mars does rule Scorpio, right? Has the courage and bravery to go into one's own darkness. And I think that that's going to be one of the saving graces, at least when Mars comes into that trine with Saturn. So, where are we now? We're going to look at the actual eclipse itself. So, which is the annular solar eclipse, like I said, the Ring of Fire, October 14th, 22 degrees Libra, this child giving birds a drink at a fountain, right? I think that we really have, most of us really have the best intentions, and we want peace. We want people to not suffer. We don't want civilians to be slaughtered right now for the sake of whatever overarching plan is getting implemented. And, especially because Pluto has turned back on now. It is moving direct by this point. The demolition machine has turned back on, just like in The Secret of Nim, right? Where the tractor finally comes alive at the time, and everybody's got to get out of there. That's kind of what it feels like. It's like, oh man, this is like the last real pass here. So Mars coming into Scorpio and being in a trine to Saturn right before this eclipse is pretty important. So, and I think is going to be one of those moments of like really digging our heels in and emotionally, and like really getting emotionally, I don't want to say strong, but still waters run deep, and Saturn in Pisces is like, yeah, I am the abyss, right? Down at the bottom of the ocean. So here's our eclipse on the 14th. And we've talked a lot about all of the particular imagery around the eclipse and what to kind of expect, what eclipses mean, like the technical aspect of it, the astrological aspect. We know that these are very intense karmic moments. We know that the new moon in Libra, right, we want to set intentions that are going to like give people what it is that they thirst for. It was already kind of blessed in many ways, and we had the vision of the value and being able to have the sight, you know what I mean, with that connection with Venus and Alcyon and a trine to Pluto, right? So, and Venus will trine Pluto again once she comes into the end of Virgo and close to Libra. She will definitely do that again. So it's usually very intense and oftentimes very very strongly sexual in a lot of ways, but that doesn't have to mean actual in the sexual act as much as the creative intensity from the sacral chakra can be very stabilized with Venus trine Pluto, and that was what was happening in the spring, I would say, with that air trine. So especially because Pluto's going to come back into Aquarius in January. When the sun comes into Aquarius, they're pretty much going to meet at the very last degree of Capricorn in January, and then they'll both move into Aquarius. And so there was some vision there, but we also, what that really entails is us being able to have the capacity to see everything in its cosmic meaning. And that says to me that that's a real asset, and that will propel us forward in a lot of ways to new creative potential. But there's stuff here that is going to be, it's going to take a while for it to find its true and its final manifestation, let's put it that way, and some really difficult things to let go of, I feel like. So let's see here, we're going to go into some more of the specifics of this time period. So, and the Libra, there's some really incredible stuff even just in the next 2 weeks of the eclipse cycle in general. So I think what we should do is now look at the actual full moon lunar eclipse and what that entails. And I already talked about it a little bit in terms of there's some hunger, right? There's some hunger, and there's a bridge there's a gap that needs to be bridged. And I feel like that it will seem like that gold rush to value whatever it is in Scorpio. I think it will seem emotionally like it actually is the bridge across some deep gorge. And I'm telling you what, the eclipse, it's not going to be exactly what we will feel it, but what we see is the shadow of the earth cast on the moon. So at least it'll be partial. It won't necessarily be fully eclipsed, but still, most of the moon will be in the penumbra or the outer shadow of the earth at the eclipse. So it's going to be a bridge, but it may not be quite obvious emotionally what that bridge across that deep gorge really is. But boy, will we be like identified with the with the intensity of reaching that. I mean, that will be very strong. So let's look at that. That's going to be on the 28th of October as well. And the biggest thing I saw, I mean, there are just, and I wonder too, other people who are like regularly following astrology or practicing astrology, is it just me? Because as I was going through the major transits, even over the next, like leading up to January, I'm like, it's just so much. It's really so much in terms of just all of the configurations. But like, not the least of which is the fact that Mars and Mercury, even at the time of the full moon in Scorpio, they're going to be conjunct on opposite Jupiter. So there's going to be such an intense like moment of planning and activation of energy. I mean, Mars opposite Jupiter is one of the best opposition transits you're going to get with especially these two, right? Because often the tension is tension, right? And opposition is tension. But when these two are in tension with each other, it really increases self-confidence and a desire to like win and get more out of life. And it brings you, the thing is, you got to make sure that you're not overstretching or overconfident. And I think Jupiter in its retrograde is going to help with this, right? Instead of getting too overinflated about this and then overconfident about your resources, especially your resources with Jupiter and Taurus. It's going to be a little bit kind of held back a little bit. But still, though, Mars in Scorpio is very, very strong. And so there'll be a natural tendency to act on the spur of the moment and have strength and courage. So just, it's important to be considerate of the needs of other people. Mercury and Jupiter are also going to be opposite. Now, these two are naturally opposite of each other. So there also has a lot to do with being optimistic and friendly and having big ideas and grand plans, but not overextending yourself. Jupiter is in retrograde. It is not outwardly expanding in terms of what the energy usually represents. So you tend to skip over details, though, when you have this transit. So again, the retrograded Jupiter may have us be a little bit more reserved, maybe kind of focusing on ways that we could expand in the future. And this is also a good time for questioning your plans and your ideas, right? You may find weak spots in anything that has to do with plans or writing or speaking or debating or communicating. So these are really intense types of transits while we're having this eclipse in Scorpio and Taurus, right? The axis of resource and shared resource. And then Mercury and Mars come into a conjunction with each other in Scorpio. So talk about just like piercing intellect, arguing your case, like serious ritualized displays of power, either communication-wise and with the intensity of Mars and Scorpio. The key to handling this energy is by having self-awareness. And so when you're feeling the buildup of nervous and impulsive energy, especially with a full moon, I'm telling you, this full moon, just remember that it's eclipsed when you're feeling all this energy and you're like, oh, I am ready to act on, and really get something going that's more than what we can do together, whatever it is, or more than what we could do separately. Bring them together. That's what Scorpio is. But it's an eclipsed moon. So it's not going, it's distorted. And it's, again, like I said, the eclipse is, now this eclipse is a north node eclipsed moon. So I would, and this, speaking of Jupiter, oh, my bad. The degree of the eclipsed moon, which will be 5 to 6 degrees, this is where Jupiter is going to station direct, 5 to 6 degrees Taurus. So for those of you who are Sabian symbol people, it's good to know what you're looking at. So, and being aware, again, another harmonic, right? Jupiter stations direct later in the year into early 2024. Everything starts to move direct after this, right? Pluto is the beginning of it, but after this, it goes, Saturn and I think, I can't remember exactly anymore the order of operations here, but I believe it's like Saturn and then Neptune and then Chiron and then Jupiter and Uranus. They all start moving direct during this eclipse cycle, leading up to the next one, right? So in this window is when everything starts moving direct that's been retrograde. There will be a Mercury retrograde in Capricorn, so that's something to consider. We've got some time till that happens. Just when you feel all this intensity with Mars and Mercury in Scorpio and the fixed star that it is in, let's see here, the fixed star that it is in conjunction with is called Alphecca in Scorpio. It is in the Corona Borealis, right? The crown. It's the jewel of the crown. This particular star is the jewel of the crown in this constellation. And it gives honor and dignity and artistic ability, but it also can be very rash and obstinate and ruined by headstrong and precipitate conduct, right? Just keep that in mind as you're feeling all of this. Intensity that it's happening at an eclipse, right? And it's a north node eclipse. So it is having something to do with where the soul is headed and wants to go, but it is not quite, it's not illuminated to the fullness, right? There's a shadow cast, there's a distortion, and that means there just needs to be more time. So boy, that's going to be really difficult, I feel like, without this awareness to not act and to verbalize all of this stuff. And remember what it said about Alphecca. I just said it, right? You have this, the jewel of the crown, and it can be very negative, right? Adultery and assertive. Okay, so what am I reading here? This is from astrologyking.com. It tended to emphasize the more perverse side of astrology. It asserted that Alphecca rising indicates a life spent in a variety of pleasurable pursuits by an individual who decked his body with adornments, secretly engaged in love affairs or adultery or all of the other disgraceful things. So when I say disgraceful, I mean like criminal things. And if the star is setting, disgrace will come. So there's, it's like a king without his crown type of thing, gets knocked off. Alphecca rules the lowest vertebrae of the spine. What is that? That's your sacrum, right? L7 is your sacrum. And well, L6 and L7, right? You have L1 through 5 are actual vertebrae, and then the last two are what have fused into your sacral chakra, right? The pump of your cerebral spinal, or at least, one place, a repository for your cerebral spinal fluid is in your sacrum, right? So this star rules this like incredible creative energy in your sacrum. So it's very important. It's very important to use it wisely. And you have Mars and Mercury conjunct in this place, opposite, and thankfully Jupiter. Jupiter is retrograde over in Taurus, and it's like, I think I need to really be mindful of how I am expanding and not overdoing it. That's the thing I feel like is going to be really difficult in this moment. And Venus will trine Uranus as well during this time, whereas Venus over in Virgo, within the next day, it will trine Uranus. And that, that takes us back to the last new moon, right? That takes us back to 23 Virgo, or 22 Virgo, where, 22 Virgo, that was the degree of the last new moon. Technically, as I'm recording this, we're still in that lunar cycle, right? The royal coat of arms. And so patience, right? Having the nobility to take on this station or this particular role that you would play as you adorn essentially the breastplate of the high priest. You know what I mean? You put on the full armor of God. And Venus trine Uranus is usually gives you the urge to try something new, to experiment. It talks a lot about relationships, but since we're talking about Virgo and Taurus, right? Structure and function of materiality, I would say that whatever the materiality is, whatever house it's in, you're going to see that there is something that is you're going to feel stimulated to try something new and to socialize and enjoy some sort of increased freedom in some ways, or just expect the unexpected, even with routine activities. And Virgo has a lot to do with routine activities. So in some ways, I feel like this could be a really good moment of, just being inspired in terms of this role that we've all been kind of we've all been working towards, especially in the last month, in terms of this royal coat of arms, and really developing to be the person that can put on this and step into this role. I think it's going to be, considering everything that's happening right now, it's going to be very, very easy to be pulled into emotionally, especially with all of the Scorpio energy that's on its way, and the fact that the sun will be in Scorpio at the full moon. With all this South Node energy and the Scorpio energy and the way it's all lining up, I think that this eclipse cycle is really going to be always a challenge in patience, right? Because you're talking about these really deep unconscious drives that are, basically it's not even hibernating. They're deeply processing below the surface of even our conscious awareness. But I think with all this Scorpio, it's going to be so intense. You're going to be feeling really the drive and the intensity and the hunger and the urge to get closer, to get deeper, to have more, because that's really what Scorpio does. It takes you to the bottom of yourself, and we're just not there yet. And I really do feel like that we have to go through the next 6 months, honestly, as all of the outer planets turn back on, and we experience a number of things, not the least of which is the North Node and Chiron coming into a conjunction, and Pluto coming into Aquarius for, not leaving Capricorn for the last time, at least in our lifetime. So we have to go through that process, and our desire to really offer something and to experience that cosmic optimism and that abundance of like, if we all just work together, and do our own unique part, the thing that we are here to be and do, then we will be able to offer that to others. And I feel like that there's, it'll be very easy to get pulled back into some sense of, you do realize now what's been happening with Israel and Palestine. We're, starting to really come together, and this particular action, so on cue. And I would say every time we're going to have a square to Pluto, which is going to be the Sun and Mercury still are going to square Pluto, as they move through the rest of Libra in the next 2 weeks. They're each going to square Pluto and have some sort of just poking at that original kind of occupation, the explosion, whatever. You're at Mars and Libra. This is like, you know what? Like, I got it all on my side. Let's go for it, right? And just like went in and did it. It's going to come back up, obviously, but in the next couple of weeks, it's going to come back up a couple more times, and we're going to have different type of relationship with it every time, whether it's the Sun, whether it's Mercury, and I just, I feel like that we still have some time to go, and that we should be very, very mindful of what we could get drawn into in the meantime to satisfy this intense identification with the fruits of not the fruits of our labors, but the power that can be generated within any type of relationship. That can be societal. Scorpio has a lot to do with how we do business and the state of banking, for instance, and with Pluto now stationing direct in Capricorn, the economy is going to be a big part of the chopping block. And so how we create resources from less resources is going to be a very present and very thought about set of, it's going to just be a set of ideas and actions and feelings. Oh my gosh, there's just going to be a lot of intensity coming. So without further ado, let's just move into the Libra new moon forecast. I feel like that I've said everything I need to say really about the eclipses. Oh, I know. We can look at the eclipse cycle that's coming in just briefly in the spring. So there'll be a partial or penumbral lunar eclipse coming in March, right after the equinox. Let's see here, right after the equinox. And so, no, not day. I'm sorry. 1 month. Okay, here we go. So there's going to be a full moon lunar eclipse on the 25th, and it's going to be at the same degree that we just had our Aries full moon, like the very same one. And the moon will be, conjunct the south node because it'll be an eclipse, right? And so this is on the 25th. We're going to have a full moon lunar eclipse in Libra, which will be exactly opposite of the full moon we just had. So I do remember bringing that up for the Aries people of just like, hey, by the way, this full moon is not only in your sign, but it's going to be the same exact degree except opposite the next full moon lunar eclipse. So you can see the continuity here with what's going on now and how it leads out to these, not only the equinox period, but also the next eclipse cycle. So that's the 25th of March, and you can see by this point, everything is direct. Chiron and the North Node have already met in their conjunction as well, and Mercury will be in Aries, where the North Node essentially is right now. So I feel like it's really, there's a lot that we're about to go through. And we know that. We've been kind of eyeing up this time period for a while, and it's not really going to be until March and the next round of eclipses. And the thing is, the eclipses are along the axis of the equinoxes because of where the nodes are, and will continue until probably the fall of 2024. Let's see here when the nodes shift into Pisces Virgo. So yeah, not even. We still got till probably 2020. Yeah, there we go. 2025 before we aren't having eclipses that are near the equinoxes. So that underlying soul drive along the pathway of equal light and dark is going to extend out for a number of years still, at least another year and a half to 2 years. So just, these underlying drives having to do with these periods of balance, it's still working itself out. And I think that, again, anything you can get from the eclipses, one thing is to have this sense of the long game, because without that, you are constantly just waiting for something to drop. And when you look at these cycles in their entirety, or start to see how they are kind of spiraling in a lot of ways, you see that we return back to the same place in some ways, but in a different place in space. And there are harmonics, there are things that are familiar, but at the same time, it sometimes it takes a couple, if you ever plant a tree, for instance, right, it's going to take years before that tree is going to start fruiting. Or if you even transplant like a tree, it's going to take a couple years before it starts fruiting. I feel like that's a lot of where things are right now, and we're simultaneously with the South Node in Libra. It's all about letting go at a societal or relational level, and it has been for years and years and years. When the South Node does move into Virgo, that's going to be the time where we start again being directed at a soul level towards the collective, right? Because the North Node will be in the sign of Pisces, and so the North Node will then, for the next 9 years, be traveling through the top of the chart. So right now we're finishing up a cycle that has to do with really coming back to terms with the creative essence of who we are as individuals, which are children of the Great Spirit or Divine Source or God, and what that means, right? Because when that changes, everything changes. And I would say that we're going to get a real sense of this truly, and I know I'm kind of jumping around, but this has really stuck out to me in particular, is when Neptune and Saturn come into a conjunction with each other in looks like 2026. It's at the vernal equinox, right? This is going to be a huge deal, and I think everything is kind of personally, I feel like a lot of it is leading up to this point. So let's see here. There we go. They're going to come into conjunction with each other right at the vernal equinox in very early 2026, I believe. Yeah, basically. Yep, January to February 2026. And so this is a big deal. And I think that we need this time, these next couple years, really, to be able to get our ducks in a row as humans on planet Earth and individual and spiritual individuals, in order to prepare ourselves for this particular moment. I feel like that this moment, this Neptune Saturn conjunction at the vernal equinox, as we are finishing the age of Pisces, which isn't going to finish until like 2600, right? The vernal equinox will not be in the constellation of Aquarius until 26 to 2700. So we got hundreds of years to go until we start the age of Aquarius, but we are finishing up Pisces. That is definitely true. And so that'll do it for that'll do it, guys, for the solar eclipse reading. I know I kind of went way out there, but I gave you the basics, and now we're going to move on to the new moon forecast. So for those of you who are not going to continue joining us for the next portion, thank you for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to or watch this video, and everything you need to support my channel, support Catalyst Energies, is in the description box below, and I will talk to you all soon. Now, let's get into the new moon forecast for the Libra people. Okay, Libra sun, Libra moon, Libra rising. Anybody with strong Libra in your chart, this new moon forecast is going to have something for you. Oh, it's 11/11. That's fun. So, Libra, we're going to look at the main astrological themes for specifically the Libra rising chart, but really any Libra person is going to find something here for the next 2 weeks. And lucky you, your new moon is also a south node eclipse. So it's not enough, Libra, at this point. You can project yourself all day as that because Venus is the ruler of Libra, right? And so Libra people tend to be very accommodating. They tend to value aestheticism, not ascetics, or aestheticism, the idea of things looking nice, right? And having an appeal, a visual appeal, symmetry, and to be the measurer in a lot of ways through just the sense of who you are and with what is balanced and fair and peaceful, right? What is harmonious. So Libra people, you project yourself as people who are who work towards harmony, who are harmonious and peaceful. Libra people tend to be people pleasers in some way because they are very adept at being able to establish for themselves what it is to be balanced and with a sense of equilibrium. So Libras tend to be very diplomatic in their own ways, but it's not from a sense of action so much as a sense of being, right? Being Venus ruled. It's just you're just built from, or you are made up of, well, let's just move on. Okay, so it's one thing to project yourself as this person that really holds the patterning of peace and balance and justice and can measure it in a lot of ways, can palpate it, can value it, and achieve a sense of balance and fairness. It's another to engage with the actual resource of that, which is for you, the second house is Scorpio. And I feel like that, as the eclipse is a new moon for the Libra person, for you, and really activates or allows an opportunity to activate some intention around really being able to offer what it is that you have gathered for yourself or within yourself to others, whatever that is, right, in relationship. And truly, the Libra person really finds their desire and creative potential in relationship, whether that's professional or personal, especially the Libra rising, having Aries as your 7th house. The opposition for the Libra person is the warrior in many ways. And so, which is interesting because that's also the same planet that rules your 2nd house. And so once there is the relationship involved, or at least an objective reality that's interacted with, there's something that turns on for the Libra person that makes you very, I would say, driven, a lot of courage, a lot of drive, and certainly with Mars being the ruler also of your 2nd house, there's a lot of output. There's a lot of energy, relational output. There's a lot of resource into relationship that is outputted through you personally. And I do feel like that what will happen with this eclipse for you guys is that the new moon is eclipsed. You have the ring of fire to set intentions around being this person, and that's going to be a process that goes through the next 6 months of deep, very very deep and soul oriented development and growth. It's not going to be really obvious until the cycle reaches its completion, which will be in the spring, just like the last eclipse cycle, which was in Aries, is now reaching its completion now, which is still impactful for you. It was in your 7th house, okay? So, but with all the energy that's going, even leading up to the full moon, and I think that's really where I want to focus for the Libra people, is leading up to that full moon eclipse in particular. And there are other transits that are going to be happening as we go through here, not the least of which is going to be a Mercury Cazimi in Libra, and then Mercury and the Sun are both going to square Pluto in your sign. So there's not just the eclipse, but you have these really intense interactions that are linking yourself and your subjective identity, the person you identify yourself as, or the person you project into the world as a Libra, and the square down to Pluto, which is in your 4th house of home and family and inner power, that has now started moving again, right? Moving forward, has stationed direct in this area. And so what had been exposed at these deep levels of where your inner power comes from, your personal life, your home and family of origin, the clan or tribe or family that you identify with, the traditions that you get emotional security from, that's all been exposed at the institutional level for you for these retrogrades, and now has turned back on and is starting to go through the demolition. It's like the root system is going to be tasked with going even, is deeper than it's ever gone before, Libra. So, and while that's happening, the Mercury and the Sun both squaring Pluto during this time, after they've come together, Mercury and the Sun, they come together in your sign. So there's this kind of transcendence, this capacity to kind of transcend the situation that you become, your capacity to do so is going to be something that you kind of have this light bulb moment about, and really projecting it into the world. Like you yourself are kind of going to be like the airplane, and people are going to be like, how can you just glide above everything like this? And you'll be like, talking to people about it, or just having this really strong mental like awareness and aha moment of this capacity within yourself. And then they both kind of square Pluto. So it's almost like it drags you back down to the depths of like where your root system really needs to be, because your power comes from the 4th house, your personal power, not your ego and your identity. Those things are important, but it's going to be the square to Pluto down into the 4th house that I think is going to be a reality check for the Libra person about this and this cycle that's going to stretch out for the next 6 months of being this person that you do, I think, naturally lean towards as a Libra person, which is to give of yourself so that the situation can be balanced and peaceful, and give people what they need by sharing what you have. But what do the 2nd house and your realm of actual resource is going to be a big part of this upcoming lunar eclipse, and something that's stretching out into the future over the next 6 months, and the way that those resources will expand moving forward. So Mercury squares Pluto on the 20th, right after the conjunction, Mercury conjunct Sun, or the Cazimi. And let's look at that actually. I'll show it to you on the chart. So, and this is just going to be, I think, a challenge. It's one thing to, project yourself as that airplane transcending everything and being up high in the clouds. It's another entirely for that square with Pluto to pull you back down to the depths of your own power. And, Pluto, for better or for worse, is definitely about power. And there is something really important for you down there, but it also, power is extracted from from the death process, right? And so whatever's going on down there, it's going to be the final death blows in this area for you, Libra. So Mercury, let's see here. Mercury comes into, one more day. Sorry, guys. And they're also meeting the South Node, by the way, conjunct Spica and Arcturus. So that also is that's also in play here. It's the same place where Mars was. Mars conjunct Arcturus and the South Node on and Spica on the day of the EBS, which was October 4th. October 8th is when Mars and Pluto were in a square, which is when Israel and Palestine really literally, there were literal explosions when that happened. So the Sun and Mercury are going to come together, and then they're each going to square Pluto in turn in the same exact position that Mars did. So there's going to be more tension. So let me talk about how these types of transits unfold. Mercury square Pluto will lead you to deeper thinking and intense interactions, more extreme interactions with people, right? Mercury is our conscious awareness and our nervous system and how it functions, and it's in Libra, so it's definitely putting those types of skills towards the rule of law, right? And what is contractual language, right? Mercury and Libra. So and in a square to Pluto, which is like, well, the contract, you signed here, and this is what whatever is generated out of this relationship is what you're going to get contractually, which is what Pluto rules. So this transit's going to challenge your thinking, right? Because again, there's this sense of kind of rising above everything and being aware that you're surrounded and assisted, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's an important aspect, but it's going to challenge your thinking which can result or lead to a crisis. And when you're talking about the darker side of humanity in your fourth house, it's going to lead to a crisis in your own inner power and how you feel, and a crisis maybe in terms of those family structures, maybe going through more demolition. That's going to really challenge this subjective personality, or this person that you think that you are, and maybe you speak to, but Pluto is going to have another say here. So it's going to challenge your thinking. There might be an urge to dig deeper and investigate the truth. I think that's one way you can deal with this matter, but you have to be willing to kind of get your head out of the clouds of who you are and be willing to do this. But you can... There's real potential here to uncover secrets and mysteries and deepen the understanding of yourself. That's the other thing. Take the high road by maintaining an open mind, not arguing for the sake of it. Oh, that can be it too as well. And then you have the Sun in a square to Pluto right after it. So this is the square, and the tension that's created is going to give you more motivation to work hard, to struggle through difficulties, achieve your goals. There's a lot of power dynamics with Sun square Pluto, and a tendency to be more assertive and controlling, and it can lead to ego conflicts and power struggles or crisis or self-esteem, identity. And I would say definitely in the fourth house, that is where your self-esteem comes from. So again, there is, there may be, you might just kind of have to push through and work hard and really be aware that you could be challenged at that level emotionally, your self-esteem or your confidence. You may have intense experiences that may trigger very deeply buried psychological issues that involve fear or losing control. And again, this is about who you are and how you emotionally identify yourself. And that's where Pluto is. And so again, home and family of origin, or, your safe space emotionally. So those profoundly rooted fears may be past life. They may be in this life, but in your past. More recent brushes with the dark side of life. And I would say, again, just Mars and Pluto in their square just happened on the 8th with Israel and Palestine. So this is going to come back up again. This is a good time to eliminate bad habits and destructive relationships, though. So there's a lot of significant transformation that is on the way for you, Libra, right after this eclipse, just days, a week after it, basically. Your ruling planet of Venus is in a trine to Jupiter. That's a 120-degree angle. That's going to be on the 22nd. And keep in mind that the moon will also meet Pluto after all of those, those crazy squares. Mars is in Scorpio, very close to the degree the Sun will be at the lunar eclipse. So, and Mars rules Scorpio. Mercury is now in Scorpio. So now the energy is going to start shifting into, well, what is yours? What is your resource, right? And your resource as a Libra person, especially Libra rising, tends to be characterized by the intensity of what is power in the relationship, okay? So, and Mars being the ruler of Scorpio, it's really driven. There's a lot of output. There's a lot of intense creative output. It's very driven. It can be very sexual with Mars and Scorpio in the second like this, output of that type of energy. And Mercury, that's really like, you know what? I'm really wanting to use this as a resource, this investigative, deep research, because that's what Scorpio is too, getting to the bottom of things. And so Mercury, can come in and be like, this is a resource, and Mercury was the only of the deities that could go into the underworld and come back out. Nobody else could do that except Mercury. And so there's something to be said for this, along with the bravery of Mars going into the darkness. I think that Libra, it's just going to be, you're going to really have to get in. You're going to have to get into the underbelly, and you're just going to have to dig into the darkness in order to really find, to dig deep and find out where your power is coming from ultimately. So Venus trine Jupiter, though, as this is all happening, Venus is your planetary ruler. It's in the 12th house. Depending on who depending on what source you're looking at, Venus in the 12th could be like, oh, you're kind of hibernating and you're keeping secrets, but it also could mean that you're a little bit more socialized. I would say as a Libra person, you already kind of have at least some social skills, and relationships are about balance and fairness to you, and that's valuable to you because Venus rules this sign. So just depending on what you're listening or reading or listening to about Venus moving through a 12th house, you may want to socialize and just become more engaged with humanity as a whole, right? And being very empathic in a lot of ways, especially in Virgo, right? Because it's of service in a lot of ways. That's what Virgo is about. But it's really about you doing your works. So it could very well be kind of a hibernation type of thing, especially Venus coming into Virgo. It's not a terrible idea to just be like, you know what, I'm going to kind of go into spiritual hermit mode in terms of just the way that I do relationship, or just the way that I interact with the world at a spiritual level. I'm just going to, come back and do my thing. But the trine to Jupiter over to your 8th house, and by the way, Venus rules this house, so there's something extra here with this trine of 8th house, which is the Scorpio house. It is the house of shared resources. This trine, I feel like, is very good for you. And the trine with Mercury and Saturn, Saturn over here in your 6th house. And I'm going to tell you what, Libra, you're in for it. Let's just be real. You really are. Let me find my notes here. So Venus trine Jupiter, and then Mercury trine Saturn. Mercury comes into Scorpio and is a trine to Saturn. Now Saturn is at a degree that it is going to station direct in very early November, okay? And it's at the 0 degrees Pisces, which for the Libra rising is your 6th house, right? The house of getting your shit together, which is what I like to call it. So it's going to station direct. Now, Neptune has been in your 6th house for years now and has just been slowly but surely dissolving every bit of your work life, your routines, your practices, everything, right? Your healing, the way you heal, the way you work, your service. It has been dissolving it down all the way. Saturn is going to stay in your 6th house, Libra, if we're doing whole sign astrology. And I would say when it starts to move direct, it's about to get a lot more real again in this area. And so this trine from Mercury to Saturn, while Saturn's still retrograde. And the good thing about Saturn in a 6th house is that, boy, it gives you some serious, some serious determination to really reconfigure yourself, right? It just like puts the foot down about it, but it also is when you are losing motivation, Saturn is there to be the metronome over and over and over in terms of establishing a new rhythm for yourself and reconstituting yourself, purifying yourself. Karmic deliverance through the practices that you're instituting, whatever they are. So this trine, it's not only Mercury, it's going to be the sun too. So this gives a very serious frame of mind with good concentration and attention to detail. So you're going to get things done on time, without mistakes when this happens. And again, we're talking about structure, which is your second house, and function, which is your sixth house. And so there's a common sense and an eye toward practical results here that I think this trine is really necessary for just being aware of, right? So Mercury is, you're kind of widening your experience in terms of, and taking a mental tour in a lot of ways, right? You're mentally getting on the tour bus to hell intentionally. And I think that this is going to give that serious frame of mind so that you can do sustained mental work and really kind of get yourself prepared for when Saturn stations direct in this house for you. And common sense, like I said, for long-term plans, signing contracts, whatever it is, and you can be confident about making commitments to others, but I would say a commitment to yourself, honestly, because that's where it starts for you, Libra, is like you have to make that commitment to yourself, and when you do, then you understand the right relationships and the most fruitful relationships for you, because you know yourself enough to know when you come out in those relationships. And whatever you put your mind to when you have a Mercury trine Saturn should lead to permanent results. And I think that it's essential that you are, again, resource and how you use those resources, because when Saturn stations direct, it's going to be, it's going to be crystallizing in terms of your work routine, your labors, your service, your healing, whatever that is for you in the sixth house. Okay. So this is good. This is really good. And this is somewhere that you can put that Scorpio energy, because otherwise it's going to be very easy to kind of get pulled into all of the rigmarole with Scorpio in terms of Mercury and Mars and opposite Jupiter. Because there's something, especially with this eclipse happening in your eighth house like this, it's distorted. You're going to feel it, but what you see is going to be shadowed by the earth, even though the sun in the second house and that intense experience and feeling of like a gold rush that pulls you away from what's familiar. You're gonna, be really kind of caught up in it and identified with it. And these are all really important things because they're a resource for you, but it may not be the bridge across the gorge that you're attempting to I would say build in terms of whoever you're sharing, professional or personal, it doesn't matter, in terms of the seventh house. It's not going to be Rome is not built in a day, and the gold rush certainly isn't going to lead to a quick fix. And I think that that's in terms of societal or resources and power dynamics and what you are generating in your relationships. I think that putting this energy towards those trines with Saturn, right, because it'll be the sun as well when it comes into Scorpio, not just Mercury, is going to be a really good use of your energy. It's going to be very stabilized. It's going to be stabilized in water signs that are in earth houses. It's going to be very grounding and also very emotionally grounding. And I would take full advantage of that, because once Mars and Mercury are opposite Jupiter, as we're coming in, and then those two are together in your second house, and we have this eclipse in the eighth house like this, it's going to be really tempting. Like the drive is going to be very, very, very strong, and it's not going to be necessarily exactly. I think it's going to be very important in that moment to be very clear with yourself and what type of situations and baggage and burdens you want to manage. in terms of shared resources, okay? I think that's really, really, really important to be aware of. And I think once we get to the full moon, Libra, you'll have a good idea of just kind of what is, what are your resources, and how do you identify with them? How do you use them as a, how do you use them as a, as a way to solve problems, and the output, the thing about it though is Mars is outputting already, and then you have the Sun and Mercury coming together and coming into Scorpio that is like, okay, I'm going to be identified with these resources, I'm going to think about and use these resources like mental resources, even though Mars just was like, yep, out the gate we go, I am going into the darkness. So it's not going to be exactly it's going to be a difficult road for you, Libra. That's just, I wish I could say it differently. And let me tell you something. This is how I know. I'll just tell you, but I would encourage you to look at more of the natal chart for the state of Israel. Because guess what their rising sign is? Ta-da! They're freaking Libra. Okay? So and I didn't get this read because I knew that. I got this read and then I went and looked and I was like, you got to be kidding me. And not just Libra, but it's at 24 Libra. It's conjunct Spica and Arcturus, where Mars was conjunct at the south node. That is the rising sign of the state of Israel. So if you still don't think that this system of tropical and Western astrology or any type of astrology is not factored into some sort of algorithm at the computer level to determine when they're going to do things, I think you're just being willfully ignorant at this point. And if you don't know anything about astrology but you're trying to learn, good on you, because it's going to give you the battle plans, because they're planning it all based on this stuff, right? I wouldn't say all, but this is factored into, the calculation as far as I can tell. It's kind of ridiculous to be like, to have all this happen, and state of Israel in particular, their ascendant is Libra, pretty much on this eclipse. Okay, so Libra rising people and Libra identified people, just be aware of what the larger frequency pattern of all of this is affecting you to down to your personal identity. So just be mindful of that and take advantage of the opportunities to really consider the burdens you want to bear in relationship, and take advantage of the Jupiter retrograde right now, because it'll station direct at the same degree as the lunar eclipse. And at that point, you'll be like, oh, I remember what I felt then. And yeah, I do realize that there was a distortion in terms of what I thought I was seeing, but I felt the fullness and knew that there was a shadow cast, and there needed to be more time to allow things to percolate, I guess, or to just under the surface, like really work itself out, That's that's why it's so important. Even the draconic chart, where you look at the unconscious drives of the soul, is really important to get an idea of like what is going on under the surface that is not necessarily accessible by your conscious mind. So, and that is a really good 8th house thing to consider as well, because this is what's going on in the depths of your own shadow. And there's going to be, over the next 6 months, there's going to be, especially even in the next month or so, oppositions not only to Jupiter but to Uranus. So just, there's also going to be surprises, there's going to be rapid change, there's going to be impulsive change, there's going to be desires for freedom, and then when we have our next new moon, it's going to be in Scorpio. So, but Libra, it's not going to be easy. It's not an easy time for you. I think there's going to be a lot of challenge to who you've been, and moving into who you are, and utilizing how you feel in these relationships to give you a sense of where you're going. And then you have Chiron involved as well in Aries. So that's going to, the wounds are so on the surface in relationship that they really, Mars really is acting out of them in a lot of ways right now, because, Mars rules Aries. And so if you're acting out of your wounds and then projecting into the, what you're creating in a relationship, well, those wounds are coming with you. So every time something quincunxes Aries over Scorpio season, you'll have a good idea of what to what's going on there, what needs to be adjusted emotionally. But otherwise, anything that's happening opposite Chiron in your sign in Libra is also bringing out those wounds that are, they're an overlay onto all your relationships. And until you get that figured out, and it's not like any of us like heal definitively, that never happens. That's an ongoing process. It's a journey. But being aware of those wounds is a big part of that. And Chiron in Aries is like, we're wounded down to our most base desires and inner child, our egos, right? So Libra, every time something's in opposition to Chiron right now, it's bringing those out for you, especially when you try or attempt to identify with who you are. It's like, how is this bringing out the wound in relationships? So there's a lot to learn, Libra, and it's going to be you're going to have a rough 6 months. I mean, but there's so much potential here. And like I said, when Saturn starts moving direct, yeah, it's going to be like, okay, the work really has to happen now. Like there's no choice around it, but the determination, like just the steely resolve that you have to really change yourself, like there's no easy bypass here. That's what the 6th house is all about. Boy, it's going to be incredible. And you got a couple years of this, right? Until Saturn and Neptune are conjunct in your 7th house at 0 degrees Aries. So the other part of this is that when we reach that point in 2026, it's going to be so impactful for you and the Aries people, like directly. So that's the other thing that's worth looking forward to. But this particular cycle and the last eclipse have been really, really important in terms of an underlying soul drive and how it translates to you as a person. And I don't want to fluff it. I wish it was different and I could fluff it in some ways and be like, oh, it's going to be fine. But after what just happened, and the connection with Israel and Libra, and the way that I'm reading this, I just know like, wow, this is going to be incredibly transformative eclipse season for the Libra people. So, and even in the next 2 weeks, it's going to be pretty remarkable. So, again, like I said, those trines from Scorpio over to Pisces, from Mercury and the Sun over to Saturn, that's where I think you really want to stabilize yourself. And this is everything to do with you. Individual identity is the first 3 houses. Individual expression is the 4, 5, and 6. And 6 is the hardest, right? It's like getting up and getting your ass on that treadmill every day, or doing that routine, even when it's the discipline. And, Saturn at least has discipline attached to it, because you don't get structures of society without disciplined effort. So it's just going to be directed now at you and your works and labors. So there's a lot to come out of it. All right, Libra, thank you for being here. I really appreciate all of you very much. Normally, I'd be offering you opportunity for a discounted lunar transit forecast, but I'm right now still not offering any personal readings. That may be changing very soon, but if it does, and when it does, I'll be sure to let you know. So in the meantime, enjoy the eclipse. Enjoy the new moon as best you can, Libra. Take care of yourself. Be open to the change and the momentum into into your new creative potential, because it's here. And there's some pretty exciting things. When Pluto moves into Aquarius in January, this is about the power of your voice, right? So that's really, really exciting. But there are some deep things that really need to just get rooted out once and for all, Libra. So take care of yourself, and I will see you on the next video. Thank you for stopping by for the whole eclipse video in general. Everything you need is in the description box below. Take care, everyone. I'll see you later. Bye.